does almost all my corporate securities. She's moving out of the legal arena and more into the consulting area for crowdfunding. Legal stuff has just become too much for her. There she is.
Hi, everyone. How are you today? Thank you so much for your patience.
Well, I was just telling him about you, Jillian, so I'm going to finish my bio and then we'll just toss it over to you.
Awesome.
So as I say, I've known her several years. She's done a lot of corporate securities transactions for me, so I know that she really knows her chops in the corporate world. What you may not know is she was really one of the only attorneys that were doing Regulation A financings before crowdfunding came about. And Regulation A was kind of the model for crowdfunding. And so she has a wealth of experience in this area. I know she's going to give you a great presentation. And with that being said, hit it.
Hi. So listen, I only have 20 minutes and then I got your questions and I have like an hour presentation. So I'm going to talk super, super fast. And today I prepared what I think is a fun presentation. I hope you guys like it. So as Jay said, I was practicing as a lawyer, but before I was a lawyer, I actually was in music. And so I came up with this concept, private money rock star. And I'm going to talk about how I came up with the concept in a second here. But today, what I want to teach you is how to avoid the 3 fatal mistakes that could cost you millions of dollars when raising capital, and talk really about how to raise capital. So I started going to law school. Then I dropped out of law school to start a record label, and I went on tour, and that just kind of blew up in my face. And this is a picture of me on tour with my husband. That to the left is Tom Hanks. What I used to do as he did the skit where he roadied for Aerosmith on Saturday Night Live, and I used to dress like that when I roadied for my husband, and I thought I was hilarious. My husband did not find me as funny. So but I ended up completely just screwing that whole thing up. I did not capitalize my company property. So how did I end up getting here? Well, I ended up getting out of the music industry. I went back to law school, and then I started raising money in the real estate business. And then the last crash came. And when the crash came, there was no more deals to do. So I started practicing law and helping entrepreneurs figure out how to raise capital for their businesses. So, I ended up, I represented people like Grant Cardone. I don't know if you guys know him, but he's pretty big in both the real estate and the business world. Working for him was really awesome, but was really even more awesome was helping smaller businesses raise millions of dollars for their business and figure out how to structure it. So look, I'm going to go over some legal things here, but I'm not a lawyer and results are not guaranteed. I mean, I'm not your lawyer and results are not guaranteed. Okay. So why do I draw this line between being a rock star and being an entrepreneur that's trying to raise money? Because the concept is the same. You've got to get a crowd to like you and buy into your story and what it is you're selling. And you have to really figure out what it takes to get that done. And then you have to think about, why do I even want to do this? So it's not like selling a car. You're really getting them to buy into a dream. Because like, if you think about like when you buy a car, you buy the car runs, and the satisfaction is there immediately. You immediately get into the car, drive it away. With an investment, it's different. You're investing and there's a long process to it. So you have to think about, how do you get this crowd to like you? How do you get to buy into your story? What does it take to get that done? And then you got to think about, why do I even want to do this? Much like rock stars start, hating their fans. A lot of times we start hating our investors because they start being a pain in the butt, right? So we have to make sure that this is something we really want to do. So, one of the most famous albums of all time, or the most favorite album of all time on all lists, is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. I respectfully disagree. I don't even think that's the best Beatles album. I think Let It Be is the best Beatles album. And for a second, I want you to think about the Beatles without Paul McCartney in it. And you take that best album of all time and you remove Paul McCartney, And this is what you end up with in terms of songs. It's there's 4 songs left. And to me, that's the same when you start taking away money from your business and not capitalizing. Like I didn't capitalize my business. That's when assets start disappearing. You don't have the money to build the machine you want in your business. So that's why we want to do it. That's why we want to use other people's money so we can build up our assets and build up our business the way we dream it to be. So you can do this a couple of different ways. Jay had mentioned crowdfunding. Another way you can do it is you can build a fund, or you can syndicate assets. And I have like real estate because that's generally speaking what's syndicated, but you can also syndicate film. You can syndicate collectibles, any asset, any hard asset. You actually can syndicate intellectual property rights. It doesn't actually have to be a hard asset, but any asset you can syndicate. Like I've seen songs get syndicated. The royalties off a song get syndicated. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. What kind of companies can do this? Well, basically any company, but most importantly, you can do this. I have seen people who've started with absolutely zero, nothing, less than what I did with my record label, and really build something amazing up. So how much experience do you need to go out and raise capital? You really do not need any experience to go out and raise capital, but you do need a framework and a system to be successful, not just to be successful in raising the capital, but also to stay out of trouble with the law. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Look, the opportunity for people to invest in your business is going to be there. You're going to start seeing people pull out of the stock market, cash in their chips essentially, and start looking for other opportunities that are outside of the traditional stock market. So you want to be ready for that. So you want to build a system that pulls investors into your opportunity in a legally compliant manner. So it's the balance of marketing and legal. You want to have the right balance there. And your company can be one of those companies that gets off on the right financial footing. So mistake number 1, I said there were 3 mistakes. Mistake number 1 is ignoring the law. The thing I find fascinating is people think that if they don't know the law, they can ignore the law. And I remember when I was in college and I parked my car on the wrong side of the road, and my friend pointed out to me, you can't park your car right there at this time. And I said, well, if they ticket me, I'll just tell them I didn't know. And they looked at me and said, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. And I cannot tell you how true that is here with securities law. Your ignorance of the law will not be an acceptable excuse. So you really want to be cognizant of the law. And it reminds me of a time many years ago, I had a client who called me up and said, hey, I got the subpoena from the state securities board. They want all my books and records. They want everything that I've done, and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, what's wrong? He said, well, they saw something on my website that was illegal. And I said, okay, well, he goes, so I've taken my website down. I go, great. He goes, so I'm just going to write them a letter. I'm not going to respond to the subpoena because this is too much stuff and I don't want to respond to the subpoena. I'm like, that's not how subpoenas work. You got to respond to the subpoena. And what he responded to me was, I can't believe this is happening. I didn't even raise any capital. So in other words, it doesn't even matter if you were like successful in your illegal pursuits. It just matters that you were illegal. It's strict liability. So you really want to be really careful. It's too bad, so sad if you're not compliant with the law. So step number 1, I want you to understand how we got here. And what it really just boils down to one case. The W.J. Howie case back in 1946 was a case that interpreted what raising capital really meant. And there was a quick test that came out of that case. The W.J. Howie Company was a farm. It subdivided the farm into 1-acre parcels and then sold off those 1-acre parcels to individual investors. The individual investors who bought the parcels were under the pretense of that the W.J. Howie Company was going to continue farming that land for them, sell the oranges from the land, and then give them the profits from the sale of the oranges. And the people who bought the parcels of land lost all their money, and then they sued the W.J. Howie Company on the basis of securities fraud. They sued on the basis of securities fraud, and and W.J. Howie Company said, well, no, we sold you a piece of land. So it doesn't matter what you call it. You could call it a land transaction, a real estate transaction, a joint venture, a promissory note. It does not matter what you call it. What the Supreme Court came up with after that whole debacle was a test that is still good law today. And if your opportunity survives the test, then you're selling a security and these laws do apply. So number one, there was an investment of money. Number two, there was more than one investor. Number three, there was an expectation of profits by the investors. And number four, through the efforts of a promoter. So if you're if any of these things apply to you, or not any of these, if all these things apply to you, then you are selling a security. In the case of the W.J. Howie Company, there was an investment of money. The investors invested money. They all had it for the same particular purpose in a common enterprise. It was to farm the land. They all had an expectation of profits. They weren't buying this piece of land for the purposes of going out and for the purposes of going out and building a home on the land or eating the oranges themselves. It was so that the W.J. Howie Company could sell the oranges and then give them the profits. And then they weren't expected to farm the land themselves. The investors fully expected W.J. Howie Company to farm the land for them. So the next step you want to do is know your investors. And there's, under the law, there's 3 different types of investors. We have you know, this is a little derogatory. It's a little not fair, right? To call unaccredited investors not so smart and not so rich. But honestly, that's how the law looks at them. They look at them as not so smart and not so rich. So unaccredited investors, actually, depending on, you know, the year you're looking at things, unaccredited investors, account for about 90% of the population, which just basically means they're not accredited investors. And if we look at our number one type of investor, an accredited investor makes $200,000 a year as an individual, $300,000 a year as a married couple, or has $1 million of net worth exclusive of their primary residence. And that actually makes up only 10% of our population are accredited. So the rest of our population is either unaccredited, and then of those unaccredited individuals, some of those people are considered sophisticated. And sophisticated people are those who understand the risks associated with investing. And so they have some kind of experience or knowledge that makes them sophisticated enough to understand the risks associated with investing. And that is a subjective test. There is no hard and fast rule. It's just truly subjective. You ask a person a couple of questions. Do they sound like they know what they're talking about? And that determines whether they're sophisticated or not. So the next thing I want you to do, so now that we know what the law is, who our investors are, we then want to find our legal vehicle. Oops, I thought I had a slide for this. So let me talk about what your legal vehicle looks like. So now that we know who our investors are, we have basically we have a couple of different buckets of what we can go into in terms of how we raise capital. And 9 times out of 10, you guys are going to raise capital using what's called a private placement memorandum. We're going to get to that. And what we're going to do is you're going to go out to investors and ask them if they want to invest in you. Now, the question becomes, how do you ask them? Do you use what's called general solicitation by advertising? And advertising can be anything from paid ads to literally blasting something out to a mailing list, or, you know, saying something publicly on your Facebook page. Those all could be general solicitations. And if you're advertising that you're looking for investors, then under Regulation D, which is the vehicle we would use, we would be limited to only taking in accredited investors. But let's just say you want to do a friends and family raise, or what we've heard of as a friends and family raise, where you talk to your friends and family or people you already know or people you've met before and have what is called a pre-existing relationship with. Then you can take money from both accredited investors and up to 35 sophisticated investors, but you cannot blast it out on Facebook. You can't send out a big mailing list. You cannot use what is called means of general solicitation. Now, Jay had mentioned Regulation A, but because we only have 20 minutes, I'm going to skip over that. And I'm just going to briefly talk about crowdfunding. Regulation crowdfunding, in the purest sense of the word, is under what's called Regulation CF. And that allows you to raise up to $1,070,000 on a registered crowdfunding portal. The three most popular, from what I can tell, are WeFunder, Start Engine, and Republic. There's other ones out there, of course, but those are the three big ones. And what you could do is you can go to one of those three crowdfunding portals and apply to see if they'll list you on their site to raise up to $1,070,000. And there you can raise money from any investor, but you must do it on the portal, and you can only advertise on the portal itself. And also, you're beholden to the portal. The portal has to accept you. So I always like going the friends and family route first, because the crowd that knows, likes, and trusts you is always more likely to invest with you. Okay, mistake number 2, not having enough time to raise capital. I see this all the time. People will call me and say like, oh, I'd like to raise capital like tomorrow. Get me my documents done. And they have done nothing to prep their crowd to invest with them. So before you're even ready to raise capital, here are some things you should be doing. The first thing you need to do is develop your rock star image. If you don't already have an LLC or a corporation going, you got to get that done. And you want to start telling people exactly who you are and who you want people to believe that you are. So if you are, the best at building mobile apps, you should be talking about mobile apps and the popularity of mobile apps and how many apps are downloaded every day from the Google Store and why your apps are better than other apps. So you just want to be talking constantly. And those people who are like, oh, I'm sick of hearing you talk about your stupid apps, like, they're not your crowd. They're not interested. So don't worry about it. Like, keep doing it. Keep talking. And because consistency will rule the day. This does not mean fake it till you make it, because we all know what happens when you fake it till you make it, especially when it comes to securities. You just don't want to do that. And I hope some of you get this joke. Okay, Heather does. Thanks, Heather. So, and actually, so I have a picture of Kiss here, and not because I like Kiss. I actually can't stand Kiss. I think they're terrible, but they are so consistent. You know exactly whose makeup this is. These guys are in their 70s and they're still wearing the stupid makeup. You got to wear your own stupid makeup. You got to make sure that you're consistently getting a marketing message out there so that people know that you're the best, that you have that product, you have that service, you have that knowledge, whatever it might be, so that you can build up that cache of credibility, a credibility snowball, if you will. Create a credibility snowball so people know, like, and trust you. People have to see an ad 7 to 9 times before they even get that they're being marketed to. So don't be shy about talking about your business, because if you're not going to have enthusiasm for your business, no one else will be. Well, okay. Step number 2, you want to get some systems in place. I had a guy ask me recently, he raised like a couple $100,000. And then he asked me, hey, do you think I can raise 25 million? And this was the thing. After he had just given me a subscription agreement, and I'll tell you what a subscription agreement is: the agreement between you and the investor that says, hey, I am looking to invest in your deal. And I'm willing to give you money, and here's all my information. That's what the agreement is. And it's provided by the company to the individual investor. So this particular person had just provided me their subscription agreement, and they sent it to me in an email. And I said, okay, so how do I sign this? And he said, you print it up and you sign it. And I said, print it up and sign it? What is this, like 2014? Like, no, put it on DocuSign. So if you can't even make it an enjoyable experience for your investors, there's no way you're going to raise major amounts of cash. You need to make it absolutely seamless. You need to make it so that they don't even think. I mean, you want them to think, you want them to make an informed investment decision, but you want to make it a pleasurable experience for them. So if you have not implemented systems as simple as like using DocuSign then you are not going to raise capital. So just keep that in mind when you're going out to raise capital. I want good customer service for my, customers of my business, and I also want a great investor experience for my investors. Because if you don't have a system, it's not just about using DocuSign, by the way, but if you don't have a system, your K1s or your 1099s at the end of the year are going to be late. You're not going to report to your investors correctly. You're going to constantly be getting questions from investors, and your day is going to be interrupted with questions from investors that you have to answer because you have not implemented a system of client or investor relations. So you need to have a system. The other thing is you've got to get ready and start getting out there and asking people for money, and getting the pump primed so that they're ready to say yes, because you are going to get rejected. In the music industry, I was very used to rejection, and I got used to it all over again in the real estate industry, because there is constant rejection, and that's no different when you're dealing with investors. So mistake number 3, I don't have time to go over Crunchbase, so I'm skipping over it. Mistake number 3, they don't have a rock star money machine. I'm going to stop here at step number 3 because I could go into this. I want to see if you guys have any questions, because I'm at 11:26, and Jay, I don't want to go too far over. So just tell me what I'm available to do here. Oh, okay. If everybody has questions, just raise your hand and we'll get to you. So I'll keep going until somebody has a question or puts it in the chat. I'll keep my little chat box open here. So not having a rockstar money machine. How do you build a rockstar money machine? So I have identified 7 parts and 21 steps in putting together a rockstar money machine. I am not going over all 7 parts and 21 steps. Here are the 7 parts. Setting up yourself, you want to set yourself up properly to raise millions of dollars. You want to understand the law. You want to craft your offer. You want to develop and sell your story. You want to turn on a money machine. This is part of having not just a seamless process for you, but a pleasurable investor experience. You want to take care of your investors after they've invested. And then you want to figure out a harvest time. Like, do you sell? Do you go public? Do you sell out to private equity? Do you sell to a venture capitalist? How do you harvest the fruits of your labor? So I'm going to go over 3 of those steps we talked about. Number 2, rather, your team getting the band together. Number 7, your funding documents plan, or recording your album, as I like to call it. And number 15, perfecting your pitch. So if you put these steps into place, your chances of building a predictable and repeatable fundraising machine are exponentially improved. So first, getting the band together, recording your album, and then going on tour. Let's talk about it. What are we talking about? So I like to do a little quiz, a little pop quiz during this slide. So the first one is getting the band together. And I have identified some key players in your fundraising that you must have: a CPA, an attorney, a bookkeeper, somebody who's going to be in charge of investor management, somebody who's going to be in charge of marketing, and somebody who knows the technology. Now, you may be, a slim operation, and that's fine. I get it. We're entrepreneurs, and sometimes you have to tighten that belt. And I'll never forget the story when I was in college about Jeff Bezos not having a real desk. He had like a door, on a slab door on top of like 2 construction horses, and that was his desk. So I get running a slim operation, and that's fine. But somebody has to fill each of these roles. And so here's your pop quiz. Who is the most important person on this list? Go ahead and write it in the chat. Attorney. Oh, somebody always falls for attorney. Marketing. No. Investment management. All right, I'm gonna save you guys. CPA, Heather. Okay, no, it's actually the bookkeeper. And why? Because nobody else can do their job if the bookkeeper doesn't do their job. It doesn't matter what the attorney does. If your books and records aren't in shape, Doesn't matter. The CPA cannot do their job if the bookkeeper doesn't do their job. The investor management person has nothing to report if the bookkeeper doesn't do their job. So it just doesn't, everything ties back to the bookkeeper. So number one thing I want you guys to make sure is you have somebody really take care of your books and records to make sure everything's going well. And Scott, I see your question, so I promise I'm going to get to it. Okay, the next thing you need to do is you need to record your album. So I said there's 3 parts. And I had mentioned this, I had alluded to this earlier, private placement memorandum. The private placement memorandum is the story, a very depressing story of your investment opportunity. And why do I say it's a very depressing story? Because what we're doing in this is we're really telling the investor all the risks associated with investing, and it's totally required under the law. So the private placement memorandum is totally required under the law. It tells them the investment opportunity, tells the investor exactly what they're getting into and what their expectations can be. And that is tied together with an operating agreement or bylaws, depending on whether you're a corporation or a limited liability company, which tells the investor how the company is going to run. It's the agreement between the investor and the company and the management. And then we also have a subscription agreement. And I alluded to this earlier as well, which is that agreement between the investor and the company where the investor is saying, I've read all your documents, I understand what's in them, and I'm getting ready to invest. And finally, we file your Form Ds, which are forms that you file with the state and the Securities Exchange Commission, stating that you're using an exemption under the law in order to raise capital. Okay, and finally, we're going to go on tour. So the thing is that my problem with, as I said earlier, I work with a lot of real estate entrepreneurs, and I can't tell you how many times they start their pitch with, this property is going to earn 18% on investment. That is the benefit of the benefit. Like that, you don't get to that first. You get to why you're doing this. You're going to lead them. You want to lead your investors on a journey. You want to get them to invest in the story. It's kind of like, and I'm totally veering off of like the music track for a second, but it's kind of like reading Harry Potter, right? You read the first Harry Potter, and then you're invested into 8 Harry Potters, right? Because you can't just leave it at 1. You got to read the rest of them to find out what happens, right? And you just keep, so you want to get them invested. You get them invested in the story. And to start with the returns is just not helpful. It's like just telling you the end, what happens at the end. Well, what's the point of reading the whole story then? So, and it's uninspiring and no one cares if you don't know the story before it. So, you really want to make sure that you're telling the investors a story of, and you can do this. I don't care what business you're in. There's a reason why you're in this business, and it's not just about the money. You saw an opportunity. You got to get your investors to see that same opportunity. So again, what's the story? You want to make sure that you're telling the story to your investors. Okay. Now there's a couple of elements to the story. There's the elevator pitch versus the deck. Your deck is your story, and it's the longer version of the story. The elevator pitch is just going to be, a 30-second snippet of that. But here's the thing about the deck. The deck and your presentation for the deck, one of the people I've studied on raising private capital is a guy named Oren Klaff, who wrote a book called Pitch Anything. If you want to check it out, it's a couple of years old now, but still a good book. And his thing is, your investor presentation should be no more than 20 minutes. And you're going to bring your investors on a journey. You want to get them to invest time before they invest money, but not a lot of time to the point where they just wish they had never met you. You want them to invest just enough time to be interested, and don't bore them to death. Your enthusiasm for your own project should be contagious. So I have a couple final questions to ask you guys. Do you want to be a Jimmy Buffett concert where everybody's having a good time and tailgating with your investors? Or do you want to be the Fire Festival And if you guys don't know what the Fire Festival is, Heather, I love it. You laugh at all my jokes. Thank you, girl. Thank you. All right. So Fire Festival, for those of you that don't know, was a big concert that was supposed to happen in the Caribbean. And then all these people showed up and it was a complete disaster. And the guy ended up going to jail for fraud. You don't want to be the Fire Festival. You want to be a Jimmy Buffett concert. Okay. So let's just review real quick. What did we cover here today? The first thing you want to do is you want to get your house in order, get your systems in place, and you want to start early. All right. With that, I will be happy to take some questions. Let's see. What is the future of investing? Instead of recording an album, would it be a tape, a CD, a digital recording? How is the capital raising market changing today? The capital raising market is changing in that you've got to be online. And that's not so much a function of capital raising, but of the changing times and especially of COVID-19. You know, I a couple of years ago, I was saying, like, if you're not online, you're doing it all wrong. And I had people who were like, I hate social media. I don't want to do social media. Look, you got to do social media. If you want to run an effective money raising campaign, you have got to be in front of investors in a meaningful way. And that in a lot of ways is social media. And you can create a community and a tribe on social media if you use it properly. And that's, I mean, and you just choose your weapon of choice. You don't have to be on all of them. You just have to do at least one of them really, really well. Because your investors, you really want to build a tribe amongst your investors. And one of the most effective and easy ways to do that is through social media. So the other thing is about investors is to reach them in more meaningful ways. Investor parties are really not a thing you can do right now. So how can you meaningfully reach your investors and make them feel special so that they tell their friends about your investment opportunity? I heard somebody unmute themselves. Does somebody have a live question?
That was me, Jillian. And I was just, there's almost, some people may see a contradiction between you telling people not to put your investment on social media and talking about your story on social media. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important that entrepreneurs understand that they can tell their story to everybody.
Yeah.
But what they can't do is say, and oh, by the way, if you want to invest.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm talking about in step one when I had the KISS picture, is that, are you out there talking about it? And we all have to be reminded of this because we all have fragile egos. Like I was explaining to somebody the other day, like, oh, I'm not sending out as many newsletters to my mailing list personally because I've seen a huge drop off on my mailing list, people unsubscribing from my newsletter, and it's hurting my feelings. Right? Which is ridiculous. And the guy said, how many people do you have on your mailing list? And I said, 17,000 people. He goes, Jillian, would you rather have 1,000 people who are going to buy from you or 17,000 people who aren't paying attention at all? And the answer is clear. You want 1,000 people who are going to sign up for whatever it is that you're selling. And that's all you need, is that you just need a tribe of people who are going to really support you. So obviously don't email people 10 times a day. That's just obnoxious. That's not even helpful to anybody, but you cannot be afraid of what people being, hurt by too many emails. It's just, those who are going to support you are going to support you. So talk about your business, embrace your business, love your business, and others will follow.
So I've got a question. In the early days of crowdfunding, everyone was saying, well, now, with crowdfunding, you can tell the world that you're raising money.
Right.
Can you go into that a little bit more so that people understand what you can and can't do?
Exactly. So when we were talking about friends and family, that's a private offering, and you cannot go out and advertise when you're just dealing with friends and family and when you're taking in unaccredited but sophisticated investors. However, if you go on a registered crowdfunding portal under Reg CF, and again, that's where I mentioned Start Engine, WeFunder, Republic, you can advertise on their websites. It's a misconception that you can advertise publicly. Now, there is another rule, which I also alluded to earlier, is when you only take in accredited investors. And when you only take in accredited investors, you can raise as much money as you want and advertise. But if your dear Aunt Sally, who's always been your biggest fan, isn't accredited, she's cut out. She's cut out of the deal. So you want to make sure you're not cut out of the will by alienating, what could potentially be really good investors by just restricting it to accredited investors only, because people who already know, like, and trust you might be cut out of the fold. So it's a very personal decision, and you have to kind of make, a list, a pros and cons list of what's best.
So just out of my experience, I've decided a long time ago that I'm only going to take accredited investors, no matter how much people want to invest. Back in the 90s, I raised a lot of money from unaccredited investors. It was under a California exemption, so it was all legal. But at the same time, those guys who put in $5,000 and weren't accredited were a big pain in the neck.
Big pain.
And the guys who put in $250,000 never bothered me at all, because they knew what they were doing. They knew the risk. And, they just weren't, these other guys were like, when are you going to do something? I need my money back. And it's like, you don't want to take money from people who are going to need that money. I think it's really important that people understand that.
Absolutely. And the other thing is too, it's one of the reasons I have a problem with crowdfunding, regulation crowdfunding, which I'm a big champion of, but the reality is a lot of these times on these crowdfunding campaigns, the average investor invests $250. Do you really want to deal with people who are only investing $250? It's just, to me, it's like, I'd rather take $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 from a few investors than to take $250 from a million investors or 1,000 investors, whatever the case may be. So that's just something to really consider. It depends on your business, though, right? Like, if you're trying to get a tribal attitude and really get the crowd to invest in your idea, and turn those investors not just into investors, but also into customers for whatever it is that you're doing, then it makes sense. But other than that, to me, crowdfunding is, you got to grit your teeth and be ready for it, because you're going to be dealing with a lot of small investors who are going to ask a lot of stupid questions.
I think that's another important point you made is, if you're going to scale your company into a large company at some point, you really think, you're going to be going for institutional investors later on.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to think about not taking smaller investors, because when you get to an institutional round, a lot of those investors are going to want you to clean up your cap table. They call it cleaning up your cap table. What it means is you got to pay all those early investors to get out.
Right.
And they don't want to get out, because they think, well, if a big investment is coming in, you guys are really going to take off. I don't want to get out. So it's another reason to be, really strategize on what you want to do before you start raising money, and figure out what your ultimate end game is. And I can't recommend highly enough that you talk to some experts in the area before you go out and decide to start raising money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jillian, do you think that it's important to focus on type of industry, like vertical, when you decide what route you're going to go through for funding? Or, like Jay says, should you really focus on who you want to be working with yourselves and who the strategic partners are for you? Or do you find it's better, sometimes in Jay's field, we're working in biotech. Is it better to go for the larger investors, accredited investors right off the bat?
Okay, so that's a great question. So I had a client who was very successful in raising capital just by, and he was in biotech, and the way he did it was he just sent like messages to doctors in that field who would understand his business model and would gravitate towards it. So he was a scientist. He wasn't a doctor. He had developed a gel. And so that delivered pain medications in a time-released form. And he let other doctors know about it. Like, that's how he marketed out to his crowd. And then what they ended up doing is they raised a couple $1 million, shut it down. And when they shut it down, they consolidated all the investors, and the investors, because he went to that sophisticated type of investor, that knew his product and were sophisticated themselves in their own rights as being doctors, he was able to wrap them all up into one unit and then take it off to venture capital. And now they're getting a venture capital seed round. So it's just a matter of, what is your thing and who are you talking to? You can always tailor your message to the crowd you want to tailor it to. So for example, I once represented a firefighter who knew a bunch of LA firefighters who had made a ton of money on overtime and didn't know what to do with the ton of money. So he built a fund specifically for firefighters to invest in real estate with him. And he offered them an opportunity that was, if you know how to talk the talk and walk the walk in a certain crowd, then you should be gravitating towards that crowd. It's kind of like you wouldn't want Taylor Swift playing in a biker bar.
Not again.
Not again. That was perfect.
You know how right now investment tends to come in hubs, right? So we all make the run up to Silicon Valley. Do you see that breaking apart a little bit and filtering out to more rural areas? Or is it always going to be the big city is where you go for the investment?
I mean, it's not going to be Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, I mean, that's going to sustain itself for a while only because there is so much wealth up there. But the reality is that, there's lower level employees who are fleeing that area because they don't have to stay there anymore. Like Facebook is like, you don't have to stay here anymore. You can go wherever you want. You just have to tell us where you are. And people, and a ton of people who during quarantine left their homes in Silicon Valley and jumped the border to Nevada. And we're seeing that with, Elon Musk left and took his whole operation to Texas. You're going to see that happen more and more and more. So, and then the other thing is what are you willing to give up for Silicon Valley? Like, what are you willing to sacrifice for Silicon Valley? I'm terrified. Like I'm in this business all the time and I'm terrified of investors. I'm terrified of them. It doesn't matter what kind of investor they are. I'm terrified of them. So you have to make sure that you're tailoring you're setting expectations appropriately for those investors, whoever they may be. And then you're also, you're rising to the occasion. You're delivering what you promised. So in the case of smaller investors and dealing with them, you need to make sure that you're tailoring yourself towards them. And then when dealing with bigger investors, like out of Silicon Valley, you're having a conversation with yourself of what you're going to put up with and what you're not going to put up with and what you're going to settle for and what you're not going to settle for before you ever talk to them, because otherwise they're just going to run roughshod right over you.
So I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, Jillian, what is your opinion of the investors that are investing in your business becoming board members?
Oh, I actually think that's great. And so I'll give you an example of, I had a client up in Calabasas who ran a big mortgage fund, and right before he even started, he set out right in the documents, if you invest over $1 million, we're going to take our top 5 investors. I don't think it was over $1 million. I think it was like something like whoever the top 5 investors are of our company, the people who invest the most money, they're on our board automatically. So you could basically buy your way onto the board if you were really interested. But the great thing about that is my client can control the deal. If he didn't want somebody in the board, he would just be like, oh, sorry, not enough room for all your money. I'll run out and find another investor who's going to invest more than you because I don't want you on my board. Or just don't take their money. That's the great thing. When you're dealing with, Silicon Valley, for example, and they start changing things up according to the contract you signed with them, and you don't like those changes, that's a problem. You can't do anything to stop that.
That I agree with, because I did have Silicon Valley investors.
Yeah.
What's the correct number of investors that you think should be for a startup company that is growing quite rapidly?
Well, it's not so much what I think, it's what you can handle and what you're willing to handle. And like I said, like, I mean, I have a lifestyle brand I'm working with right now, and I would love to have 1,000 investors in that lifestyle brand, because those investors are also going to be my biggest marketers, and they're also going to be my biggest customers, right? So that's why I potentially want investors in that brand. But my real estate companies, I want as few investors with the most money as possible, because they're not my customers. They're not going to be renting, they're not going to be renting spaces. They're not going to spread the word about my company so I can, sell more apartment buildings or whatever. So it's just a matter of what your brand is and what you're doing. Can I ask you what is it that you're doing, Michael, that you want to raise money for?
No, I don't want to say at this point in time.
Okay, that's fine. So
It's
yeah.
somewhat of a confidential situation. But in the past, I had a startup company where I had investors, and our board was too big, and they required too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they were only interested in their own agendas rather than how the company was growing and structured.
So you got it, but that's the thing. And this is part of the mistakes, right? Is not setting your systems up in advance. And if you don't have your cap table, one of the parts of the private money machine are setting up your cap table. Because here's the thing, if you don't know what your cap table is going to look like by the time you're done raising capital, then you've already done something wrong. So you want to know what the future looks like, because the problem is if you have a super screwed up cap table where you just decided to dole out stock whenever you felt like you needed to, no one's going to ever, there's no venture capital, private equity going public that's going to fix that. You might be able to go public, but other than that, you're not going to be able to fix that. So you really want to set that in advance. If you know, like, you want to maintain control of the board, then don't seat more than 3 people on the board.
So three is the number, because we had 10.
Yeah. 10. I mean, you could still do well with 5, 7, but you just want to be mindful of how many people. And then guess what? If you word it just so, you always have the ability to change it later if you want to add more people later.
Right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Jillian, I've got a question. It's kind of a two-parter. You have a lot of portals where startups can put their business plan on the web, like Angel List or Gust. What's the deal with those? And then my second one is, a lot of, like, Riverside County is having Innovation Month, and we're having all these pitches. And so people are out there talking to a whole group of people, a lot of them unaccredited, about what they're doing and actually pitching their investment. Could you go over both of those things and what you should and shouldn't do with each of them?
Well, the big thing is okay, if they're inviting you to make an investment pitch.
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't make an investment pitch at all. I'd go the exact opposite direction. The most successful investment pitches I've seen were, again, pitches that told the story and had nothing to do with actual what's in it for me, for the investors. They're going to figure, once they're interested, they're going to want to know about it. They're going to ask you about it. You're going to have a conversation with them, because you shouldn't just be, especially in an environment like that where, you're going to have some kind of relationship with the investor down the road. It's not like on a crowdfunding portal. You are going to really need to make sure, you're getting to know your investor as much as they're getting to know you. So I wouldn't even pitch the opportunity. I would pitch the story of the company.
That's kind of what I try to tell the companies when they're pitching, is don't get into the what's in it for you. And then inevitably what
they all do it. Yeah.
No, what the panel that's judging them says is, you haven't told me anything about what's in it for me, so I'm not interested. So that's kind of a fine line to walk. You really have to grab their attention, is I guess what you're saying. And it goes back to be a rock star, So you have to really put on the persona. And
absolutely. No, you have to That's exactly it. You gotta razzle dazzle them and charm them and get them to buy into what you have before you tell them what's in it for them. The what's in it for them. I created a couple of years ago, I created the software that you put in your information and you upload some pictures and it would spit out a pitch deck. And I was never quite satisfied with the way it works. So I never released it to the public, but I did make it. And one of the way it would run is you would tell the story. You'd give them the why, what, how, what if, and then you would end with what. And the ending of the what would be, here's what's in it for you. And it's one slide, quick snapshot. We're giving, so, and it's almost like Shark Tank, right? Shark Tank, they come out, they razzle dazzle you, they tell you a good story. And at the end of the presentation, they say to the sharks, I'm going to give you 25% of my company for $250,000. And then they decide. And that's so you end with that. So if you're thinking about how you're going to do a presentation, there's a very simple formula for this. And I learned this from a guy who's an expert in hypnotism and neuro-linguistic programming. And he taught it to me, not having nothing to do with investor presentations, but it works for an investor presentation. You start with why, you go into what it is you're doing, you go into how you're going to do it. You talk, you bring your investors into the dream. What if you could be a part of this? And then you end with what, and that what is what's in it for them.
And then AngelList and Gust and places like that, because they're not crowdfunding portals. They're really places where entrepreneurs can put their business plan and have investors contact them.
Oh yeah, no, but it's still the same concept. The ones that are going to get the attention are the ones that are razzling and dazzling with a great story.
Right. What's the legality of putting your business plan on Gust?
I don't know about, I know about AngelList, because AngelList is only accredited investors, so you can do it all day long on there. But I don't know about Gust, and I don't know why.
Maybe Gust is accredited only as well.
Okay.
Maybe that's how they get away with it.
Yeah, that probably. I know I've heard of it before, but I don't think I've been on there. AngelList, though, I used to be on there all the time, checking out, see what's doing. Anybody else? We went way over, so I thank everybody for sticking around and hanging out.
Well, it's
today.
a lunch hour, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully somebody ate something.
Awesome. All right, guys, let me know if you need anything else. Jay has my contact information, so if you need to get in touch with me, he can get that all out to you.
Great. Thanks, Jillian.
Thank you. Talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.